Hello students, welcome back to my YouTube channel, Your English Teacher. Today we are going to study the chapter Journey to the End of Earth by Tishani Doshi. This chapter is the third chapter of your class 12 textbook Vistas. So let us go to the chapter, but before that I want you to ponder over a few things. I think so there's a need to foster an understanding and respect for our planet. You are the future generation of policymakers. And if you ever get a chance to go on a life-changing experience at an age when actually you're ready to absorb, learn, and most importantly act, then you might realize the threat of global warming is actually very real. Tishani Doshi, the writer of this beautiful piece of literature, has actually herself been a part of such a life-changing experience. And now we can see in 4 months, almost, since January, COVID has scaled beyond China's borders in mid-January. And now we can actually see that we are dependent upon nature. We have to ensure that nature doesn't take its toll over us human beings. And this chapter is very apt during this COVID-19 pandemic. Unfortunately it is, but it is. So let's learn a few things about Tishani Doshi. She's published 6 books of poetry and fiction. Her essays and poems and short stories have been widely acknowledged. And the journey to the end of the earth, in this she describes her journey to the coldest, driest, windiest continent in the world, Antarctica. And the world's geological history is trapped into Antarctica. Geoff Green's Students on Ice program aims at taking high school students to the ends of the world. Though she thinks that Antarctica is the place to go and understand the Earth's present, past and future. And this is what we are going to see in the next page when we begin the reading of the chapter. So before you read, she puts a couplet here. If you want to know more about the planet's past, present and future, the Antarctica is the place to go. Bon voyage. Early this year, I found myself aboard a Russian research vessel, the academic Chokalsky, heading towards the coldest, driest, windiest continent in the world, Antarctica. My journey began 13.09 degrees north of equator in Madras and involved crossing 9 time zones, 6 checkpoints, 3 bodies of water and at least as many ecospheres. By the time I actually set foot on Antarctica continent, I had been traveling over 100 hours in combination of a car, an aeroplane and a ship. So my first emotion on facing Antarctica's expansive white landscape and uninterrupted blue horizon was relief, followed up with an immediate and profound wonder. Wonder at its immensity, its isolation, but mainly at how there could ever have been a time when India and Antarctica were part of the same landmass. The part of history to understand this chapter. 650 million years ago, a giant amalgamated southern supercontinent, Gondwana, did indeed exist, centered roughly around the present Antarctica. Things were quite different then. Humans hadn't arrived on the global scene and the climate was much warmer, hosting a huge variety of flora and fauna. For 500 million years, Gondwana thrived, but around the time when dinosaurs were wiped out and the age of the mammals got underway, the landmass was forced to separate into countries, shaping the globe much as we know it today. To visit Antarctica now is to be a part of that history, to get a grasp of where we've come from and where we could possibly be heading. It's to understand the significance of the Cordilleran folds and the Precambrian granite shields, ozone and carbon, evolution and extinction. When you think about all that can happen in a million years, it can get pretty mind-boggling. Imagine India pushing northwards, jamming against Asia to buckle its crust and form the Himalayas, and the South America drifting off to join North America, opening up the Drake Passage to create a cold circumpolar current, keeping Antarctica frigid, desolate, and at the bottom of the world. For a sun-worshipping South Indian like myself, 2 weeks in place where 90% of the Earth's total ice volumes are stored is a chilling prospect, not just for circulatory and metabolic functions, but also for the imagination. It's like walking into a giant ping pong ball. I'll be discussing the part of history, how Gondwana led to a separate set of continents in a few minutes, once I first go on to the next page that follows in the text. So that page actually is walking on to a big ping pong ball, devoid of any human markers, no trees, billboards, buildings. You lose all earthly sense of perspective and time here. The visual scale ranges from the microscopic to the mighty midges and mites to the blue whales and icebergs as big as countries. The largest recorded was the size of Belgium. Days go on and on in the surreal 24-hour austral summer light, and an ubiquitous silence interrupted only by the occasional avalanche of calving ice sheet consecrates the place. It's an immersion that will force you to place yourself in the context of the Earth's geological history. So once I've completed this, I'm going back to the slides I wanted to discuss so that you can get an understanding of how the Himalayas were formed, what was Gondwana, how did the present continents come into being. So when we look at the part of history of Gondwana over here, we can see that 650 million years ago, a giant multi-part southern supercontinent Gondwana existed. Okay, it is out of this whole huge mass that the separate continents which you see here outlined, Australia, Antarctica, Africa, South America, India and Arabia were formed. How were they formed? It's given over here, the separation of Gondwana. The Gondwana mass started to disperse around 165 million years ago. So this is how that whole huge big landmass separated, and then the Antarctica came to the South Pole, whereas the rest of the continents over here you can see were formed. If we look at the formation of Himalayas, that portion which went and stuck with Asia, when this landmass started pushing and connecting itself to the bigger landmass, the landmass over here, it pushed the mountains higher and therefore it jammed against Asia to form the Himalayas. Okay. Now, how were the things different earlier? The things were very different because humans hadn't arrived on the global scene and the climate was much warmer. And it used to host a variety of flora and fauna. For 500 million years, Gondwana, that big landmass, thrived. But around the time when the dinosaurs were wiped out and the age of the mammals had got underway, the landmass was forced to separate into different countries and therefore shaping the globe as much as we know it today. So if we look at this, we'll be able to understand this. I understand there are certain things like surreal. What does surreal mean? It means unusual, bizarre, relating to the southern hemisphere, but at times we say this is a surreal experience. It means a very unusual experience. Many have not gone through it. Okay, ubiquitous is everywhere. There was silence everywhere. Avalanche, everybody knows it's a snowslide, and calving in means that it started caving in. Okay, and that is how it consecrates as something to do with sanctity and therefore make or declare that this is a sacred place. Fine. So let's go on to the next portion of the text, the human impact. Human civilizations have been around for paltry 12,000, you can say, years. And the way she uses the term paltry, insignificant, in front of 12,000 years, actually in context, it is not significant because the human civilizations have hardly been there. Barely a few seconds on the geological clock. That's why she uses the term paltry here. Paltry means insignificant. In that short amount of time, we've managed to create quite a ruckus, etching our dominance over nature with our villages, towns, cities, megacities. The rapid increase of human population has left us battling with other species for limited resources. And the unmitigated burning, that means unconditional, we keep on doing that. Burning of the fossil fuels has now created a blanket of carbon dioxide around the world, which is slowly but surely increasing in the average global temperature. The climate change is one of the most hotly contested environmental debates of our time. Remember, children, this essay has been written by Tishani Doshi. This piece of literature has been written way ages ago, and a few decades back. And even now when you read it, it seems to make sense, like the Ailing Planet made sense in class 11. The climate change is one of the most hotly contested environmental debates of our time. Will the West Antarctic ice sheet melt entirely? Will the Gulf Stream ocean current be disrupted? Will it be the end of the world as we know it? At times, even now during the COVID-19 pandemic, we feel as if maybe this is going to be the end of the world. But we need to keep our spirits high, and we need to understand that human race is not that easy to become extinct, and we need to do our own work, our own little bit. Maybe, maybe not. Either way, Antarctica is a crucial element of this debate. Not just because it's the only place in the earth which has ever sustained a human population and therefore remains relatively pristine. When you talk about things like pristine, it means it has never been touched. It's in its original form in this respect. But more importantly, because it holds in its ice cores 500,000-year-old carbon records trapped in its layers of ice. If we want to study and examine the Earth's past, present and future, Antarctica is the place to go. And why I have highlighted, if you can see, there are certain texts which I've highlighted with a yellow highlighter because these portions are usually asked in the exam at times for board exams, and it could be of some help to all of you. So, the human impact. The rapid increase of human populations battling with other species or limited resources, unmitigating burning of the fossil fuels has now created a blanket of carbon dioxide all around the world and increasing the average global temperature. So if there's something like what has been the human impact on the globe, this can be taken up. It is nothing, children. It is just lines that have been taken up from here. Okay. So let us go on to the next portion. What are the consequences if we don't take care of our planet? The climate change is one of the most hotly contested environmental debates of our time. There are questions like whether the West Antarctica sheet would melt entirely, whether the Gulf Stream ocean is going to be disrupted, or whether this is going to be the end of the world. As I told you, it makes a lot of sense now also when we talk about COVID-19 pandemic. We seem as if, oh God, what has the world come to and what have we left for our children, actually, our generation. So coming back to the text, Students on Ice, the program I was working with on, as I told you, she's gone through a life-changing experience, and that's why she's written this piece of literature. It is purely out of experience. She was one of the persons on Chokalski, and the program she attended was the Students on Ice program. What did it aim? It aims to do exactly this by taking high school students to ends of the world and providing them with inspiring educational opportunities which will help them foster a new understanding and respect for our planet. It has been in operation for 6 years now, okay? And at that time, headed by Canadian Geoff Green, who got tired of creating celebrities and retired rich curiosity seekers who could only give back in terms of a limited way. Now, what was a limited way? They could only give money. They could not give anything else. They could not contribute in the way he wanted them to contribute. So with Students on Ice, he offered the future generation of policy makers a life-changing experience at an age when they were ready to absorb, learn, and most importantly, act. Now, the same experience he was providing to the celebrities here, but the celebrities were not really doing any good to him. It was not really helping him out at all. The purpose of this visit was to create awareness and to ensure that people work for the betterment of the globe. But this was not working when he was taking celebrities. The reason the program has been so successful is because it's impossible to go anywhere near the South Pole and not be affected by it. It's easy to be blase about polar ice caps melting while sitting in the comfort zone of your respective latitude and longitude. At home, you can talk about it. Oh God, icebergs are melting down, the glaciers are melting, and global warming is happening. But when you are actually introduced to that scene, it makes a much more powerful impact in a way. But when you can visibly see glaciers retreating and ice shelves collapsing, you begin to realize that the threat of global warming is actually very real. Antarctica, because of a simple ecosystem and lack of biodiversity, is the perfect place to study how little changes in the environment can have big repercussions. Take the microscopic phytoplankton. Now, she's going to give an example that if we take care of small things at a time, do a little bit, there is a way that we will be able to overcome the hazardous future we are walking towards. So if we take care of the phytoplankton over here, phytoplankton are the smallest grasses of the sea that nourish and sustain the entire southern ocean's food chain. If we take care of this, it's like the corals. If you see the coral islands over there, the corals, not here, but out in the Pacific. So these single-celled plants, that is the phytoplankton, they're single-celled plants. They use the sun's energy to assimilate carbon and synthesize organic compounds in that wondrous and most important of processes called photosynthesis. Scientists warn that a further depletion in the ozone layer will affect the activities of the phytoplankton, which in turn will affect the lives of the marine animals and the birds of the region and the global carbon cycle. In the parable of the phytoplankton, there is a great metaphor for existence. Take care of the small things and the big things will fall in place. Because the phytoplanktons, if they are not taken care of, the whole food chain is disrupted. So here, there's a metaphor here. If you take care of small things like phytoplankton over here, the phytoplankton becomes a metaphor of all things that small things that we should take care in our world. Walk on the ocean. My Antarctic experience was full of such epiphanies. But the best occurred just short of the Antarctic Circle at 65.55 degrees south. The Chokalski had managed to wedge herself into the thick white stretch of ice between the peninsula and Tadpole Islands, which were preventing us from going any further. The captain decided we were going to turn around and head back north, but before we did, we were all instructed to climb down the gangplank and walk on the ocean. So there we were, all 52 of us, kitted out in Gore-Tex and glares, walking on a stark whiteness that seemed to spread out forever. Underneath our feet was living, breathing salt water. In the periphery, crab-eater seals were stretching and sunning themselves on the ice floats, much like stray dogs will do under the shade of a banyan tree. It was nothing short of a revelation. Everything does indeed connect. So the experience itself teaches you a lot. That's why before going back, he wanted all the 52 students to step out off the ship and onto the thick ice. 9 time zones, 6 checkpoints, 3 bodies of water, and many ecospheres later, I was still wondering about the beauty of balance and play on our planet. How would it be if Antarctica were to become the warm place that it once used to be? Will we be around to see it, or would we have gone the way the dinosaurs, mammoths, and woolly rhinos? Who's to say? But after spending 2 weeks with a bunch of teenagers who still have the idealism to save the world, all I can say is that a lot can happen in a million years, but what a difference a day makes. Because this is one experience in her lifetime that she is definitely never ever going to forget. And imagine those 52 children, how they might have contributed and given back to the world when they went back to their own professions. So let us see what is that phytoplankton refers to, these small single-celled, organisms that bloom like, think sea pea soup, which can cover thousands of square kilometers of the ocean. And she talked about the phytoplankton. They are the foundation of the aquatic food web. They are the primary producers. They feed everything from microscopic animal like zooplankton to multi-ton whales. So the phytoplanktons are food for all of these. The small fish and the invertebrates also graze on the plant-like organisms. And then those smaller animals are eaten by bigger ones. So phytoplanktons nourish and sustain the entire southern ocean's food chain. These single-celled plants use the sun's energy to assimilate carbon and synthesize organ compounds in that wondrous and most important part of the world. So all you need to do is take care of the small things, and the big things will fall into place. This is a big message through this piece of literature. So I hope, children, you've understood the chapter. I hope that you will be able to answer questions and relate to it, especially at this time of the pandemic. Do subscribe to my channel. Ask your friends to subscribe to it. This is a complete line-to-line text explanation. The next few videos will be text questions, short answer questions, and long answer questions. So you will be having 3 videos following this video. And do visit my Facebook page as well. On the Facebook page, we'll be talking about very different things, nothing related to the course. Beauty of literature, beauty of life in general. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Stay indoors and stay safe.